beautiful salon and spa. Here a Sasquatch or Bigfoot can become anything she or he desires. Release yourself from the woods you've lived in so long and start thinking. Hollywood, forget the running and start the funnin'. We'll make you as fabulous as you were meant to be.
The Big is Beautiful Salon and Spa exclusively serves the humanoids known as Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It is located in a secret location in the American wilderness, known only to its customers. This is the waiting room. Here's the receptionist.
Okay, number 48, we're ready for your pedicure. Don't whine to me about your weight, hairball. We're really booked up today, so just go on in. Big and beautiful. What? No, we're all booked up today. You should have made a reservation days ago. Don't give me your sob story that you live in the woods and don't have Wi-Fi to go online. I've heard it all before. Do it like everyone else. Leave a dung heap reservation on the doorstep. How did I get this stupid job anyway? It's like Planet of the Apes in this shithole. Okay, 49, we're ready for your face waxing. Don't start with me, Kong Jr., not today. Oh, you want a piece of meat, Chewbacca? You just try it. You'll barely be a gorilla in the mist when I'm through with you.
Excuse me, miss?
Who the hell are you? You look human. What the hell are you doing in here?
I'm from the top-rated TV show, Bigfoot Hunters, and I heard this spa was the place to be if you were a hip-happening Sasquatch.
Yeah? Well, you heard wrong. These aren't Sasquatch. They're just professional hoaxers in costume to give you TV idiots something to chase after.
Is that so?
Yeah. Your networks pay them, and us, so you look convincing in your reality chase shows.
Well, I must say they all look very authentic.
Listen, Big Shot, haven't you ever heard of Hollywood? They know how to do animatronics and costumes. Now scram, will ya? We got work to do. And so do you. Forget you ever saw this place. It ruins the illusion for your TV streaming audience.
Right. Well, if it's all the same to you, I'd like to bring in my camera crew and get a few interviews and some B-roll.
Interviews, huh? Hey, Bob, I've got a little intruder issue out here in the lobby. Can you help us out?
Listen, wait a minute.
I did give you a chance.
I'm unarmed! Please! Ah!
Thanks, Bob. Please get him out of here. Oh, and there's also a camera crew outside. It'd be great if they all woke up 24 plus hours from now in that dumpster in Spokane we like to use with their memories wiped clean for the past week. Thanks, Bobby. You're my man. Missing link or whatever. Everybody, sorry for the crazy morning and the disruptions. To make it up to you, everyone's appointment today is on the house. Also, you each will get a tall glass of Wildeberry champagne straight from your cousin's vineyards in the remote Yukon.
True crime.
Sex.
Political conspiracy.
Celebrity gossip.
Murder.
UFOs.
Crooked officials.
The occult.
Assassination.
Courtroom drama. Rape.
Corporate scams.
Scandal Sheets. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scandal Sheet. My name is Thad Helsley, and today we are checking in on the latest developments with America's favorite and most elusive monster, Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch. And to discuss this deeply mysterious creature, I am joined, as always, by my tireless Sherlock Holmes-style investigator and millennial co-host, Anurada. Anurada, with the many recent sightings, it is apparently Bigfoot spring here in the U.S.
Well, Thad, I've seen a couple of Bigfoot-looking people outside, so wouldn't be surprised, Bigfoot is just walking around. I did not know, however, that Sasquatch and Bigfoot were the same. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Yes.
Two different names for essentially the same creature. There are other names that people have. Those are the most common that are in use. And so if you go to a website or something, they'll say Bigfoot / Sasquatch. It sort of depends what part of the country you're in, I think.
Oh, that's very interesting. I didn't know that.
And of course, no episode of Scandal Sheet could be complete without our artificial intelligence engine, Bernice. Bernice, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Since these alleged creatures have skillfully eluded being positively identified by humans for thousands of years, I would say they are much more intelligent than your own Homo sapiens species, which, actually, isn't saying that much.
Damn, Bernice.
Thanks for those compassionate comments, Bernice.
You're welcome. And by the way, no one hired me to be nurturing on this podcast. Anuradha, I can understand why Mr. Halkley is sympathetic to the Bigfoot legend, as he is probably a subhuman missing link himself. But you're supposed to be the smart one. I was hoping you might talk him off the ledge.
Bernice, I try. He doesn't listen to me. But I get what you're saying.
Well, that's great. It's great to have support in all quarters. Okay. All right, so Anuradha, are you ready to lace up your hiking boots with me and venture into the deep wilderness with our state-of-the-art infrared cameras, motion sensor equipment, and lab kits to test fecal, urine, and hair samples?
Hell yeah. Let's do it. Let's find Bigfoot.
Okay, good. I'm asking because the most recent reported sighting of a Bigfoot creature occurred only a few weeks ago in your home state of Pennsylvania.
Damn.
What made this report extra compelling is that this photograph in question was not taken by some half-toothless mountain hillbilly with a cell phone. Instead, it was taken by an overeducated and overpaid employee of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Now, NOAA has been a historically respected, nonpartisan scientific agency for over 200 years. Among other things, they operate the National Weather Service, which is responsible for hundreds of useful predictions and life-saving warnings in the U.S. Here is one report on this particular sighting from Philadelphia Television.
Courtesy WTXF-TV, Fox 29, a member of Fox Television Stations, LLC.
We're about to show this video.
Listen, he might exist, but could he really be here in Pennsylvania? That's my thing.
He's supposed to live out in Oregon and Washington State.
I mean, he could travel. He's got big feet. Seems like he can move.
That's true. He can get around quickly.
The National Weather Service posted this photo of their team checking out storm damage in Fayette County, and that's out by Pittsburgh. And look at that, what's going on back there. Yeah, it was just spotted over the border in West Virginia, and now apparently made its way to PA.
What about the dude in the foreground there? Does he even know that's behind him?
It doesn't look like it. He's facing the camera.
Yeah.
So. According to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization.
I belong to that group.
Oh, do you? Pennsylvania ranks in the top 10 states of Bigfoot sightings.
I did not know that.
So Bigfoot likes it here.
Anuradha, NOAA seems pretty legit, and we depend on them year-round to tell us about our weather in this country. And this photo seemed to be an inadvertent capture, but they stand by it. What do you think?
I mean, that, I think it's pretty incredible. I mean, I think it's a little coincidental that they captured that. I'm not saying it's not real. It probably is. Or, I don't know. But I think it's really coincidental that they captured that, considering there are more and more people that are coming out with their own weather channels that you can watch on YouTube. So maybe they're trying to ramp up interest, and maybe inadvertent means a little bit advertent. I don't know. I'm just thinking about it, and it could be legitimate. It could be a coincidence, like, oh wow, we just happened to capture this. But I just find that a little interesting.
What's particularly interesting in your state's sighting is that though there have been thousands of sightings across the U.S. for over 50 years, they mostly occur in the Northwest, like Washington, Oregon, Alaska, and Canada. But this one is in Pennsylvania. So I was just wondering, I don't know how the heck they got all the way, 3,000 miles away, but are any of your Pennsylvania neighbors expressing any thoughts on how Bigfoot made its way this far east?
Not really. I feel like no one's really noticed, not so much Bigfoot, even though I would definitely entertain a conversation about that if someone would bring it up. I would love to bring it up. I just don't know how to casually bring it up without looking crazy.
Anurada, would you describe yourself as a Bigfoot believer, a skeptic, or something else?
Well, it's a good question because I feel like I used to be very skeptical about a lot of stuff. And then, certain things, I just feel like our world there's just so many unknowns. There's so many things that are coming up that people didn't necessarily believe in before. And now they're like, oh shit, like that was actually real. That was actually a thing. So I feel like it's not too far of a reach now to imagine that this creature exists and is maybe among us or hiding among us somewhere, because there's so many other things that may potentially have not made sense before that are definitely around and definitely here now. You know what I mean? Aliens and so on and so forth.
Well, whether one is a skeptic, a believer, or something else, you can't dispute the enormous number of Americans that count themselves as passionate believers. I mean, with multiple reality documentary TV series, some that have lasted for 8 or 9 seasons, and over a dozen annual conferences and festivals devoted to the discussion of Bigfoot, it would appear that many, many millions of people, in this country at least, believe in this creature. That's more people than believe that UFOs are extraterrestrials or practice a number of well-known religions. So, I mean, they can't all be delusional, can they?
I mean, just the fact that there are more people that believe in this creature than that believe in like UFOs and stuff, I feel like that's very interesting. Thad, where'd you get your information from? Where are you looking?
I'm looking on Wikipedia, basically.
Some drunk guys just going in there adding things in Wikipedia. And
Maybe.
You're like, ah, yes.
And there's a lot of websites, and then there's so many TV shows devoted to it. So and all the people on the shows are supposedly quote unquote experts. They've written books, or there's a whole area of science or pseudoscience called cryptozoology, and that is the search for creatures that maybe are legendary or maybe not. So it's not just Bigfoot. It could be the Loch Ness Monster. It could be, in Missouri, there was something sort of Bigfoot-like, but they called it Momo the Monster. So a lot of these reality shows are these people, supposedly scientific teams going out searching for Bigfoot.
Damn, that's wild.
It seems that the explosion of interest in Bigfoot has occurred since the publication of this old film, which is called the Patterson-Gimlin film, because those are the two guys that took it, way back in 1967 in the woods in Washington State. And we're going to talk about that a little later in the episode and kind of break it down. But belief in the creatures we now call Bigfoot or Sasquatch existed among indigenous people in North America thousands of years before Europeans arrived here. So, Bernice, can you quickly catch us up on that?
Yes. While pre-Columbian indigenous American people did not have a written language of their own, they conveyed their 10 millennia of folklore traditions to the new European colonists of the 16th century, or, you can call them invaders, take your pick. At any rate, the rich legends of the Native Americans were recorded by these European settlers. Their collective folklore include tales of mysterious hair-covered creatures living in the forests, which sounds very much like what we think of Bigfoot today. So, spoiler alert, the modern History and Discovery channels did not make up the Bigfoot Sasquatch myths, they merely exploited pre-existing traditions that were already thousands of years old when the Europeans first arrived and learned about them.
What is more likely? In this country, we are not 100% rationalists. We propagate popular myths and legends all the time. But most of those times, it is to children. For example, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy. And most adults know these myths are only myths. But...
Spoiler alert.
Or they're what?
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler.
For our young listeners out there.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, Mom. But most adults don't spend $3,000 to attend a 3-day conference to examine the latest evidence on the tooth fairy.
Listen, I mean, Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, I feel like, can we truly put that in the same category as things that may actually, like, there's more of a potential for them to actually have existed? You know what I mean? Like, do we see, like, Santa Claus footprints on the fireplace? You know what I mean?
You're saying because there isn't a Bigfoot in the shopping mall that kids can have their pictures taken with?
No, I'm saying, like, so Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairy, again, spoiler alert, people. I mean, that's obviously made up.
Are you saying you're saying they're made up? What do you mean?
Thad, I'm sorry. I know you were.
Damn it.
You were waiting for your gifts.
Where did those colored eggs come from on your order last week? I got a chocolate bunny, and I got colored eggs. Who did that? Huh? You tell me.
Your daughter comes up and puts it there. No, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's obviously not real, But this stuff, they've seen footprints, they've seen, you know what I mean? Now there's sightings and those kinds of things. So I feel like, can we truly put those in the same category? Maybe not. You know what I mean? Aliens, I feel like aliens, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, all those things are, like, most likely probably real. You know what I mean? Or, like, a certain part of it is real, but maybe not all the stuff that we believed before or that we think before, right? Maybe aliens don't have, like, big heads and big eyes. Maybe Bigfoot is, like, naked, doesn't have any hair. Like, who knows? You know what I mean? So I feel like it's, to your point, no one's going to be spending $3,000 to come to a tooth fairy convention or a tooth fairy.
Well, I might. I don't know. It depends on how hot she is. But
the hot tooth fairy.
The hot tooth fairy. Julie Andrews is Tinkerbell, or not Julie Andrews, Julia Roberts. Okay, so on your auto, what we're going to do now is we're going to cut to a partial replay of a Bigfoot episode that we did a little while back that probably very few of our recent followers have ever even heard of before. So it covers a lot of the backstory on Bigfoot that we didn't really go into here, but it'll break down the Patterson-Gimlin film and some other things. So in the meantime, Anurada, if you and your family capture that Bigfoot specimen that the NOAA photographed in Fayette County, I hope you'll let us know, right?
I will definitely take a video and send it over to you and put it next to your colored eggs.
Let's just hope they like eggs.
And now a replay of selected excerpts from an earlier Bigfoot episode starring our previous co-host, Ellie.
A 1997 call to 911, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest.
911, what are you reporting?
With someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? A person or an animal, or?
I can't tell. All I know is my central light came on and I just happened to glance and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man, or something that looks like a man. I don't know what it was, just that it ran across the yard.
Okay. You've had problems in the neighborhood before?
Yeah, my dog was killed here just recently. I don't know what it was, whatever it is that's running. Couldn't catch it if I was going to chase it, or whatever it was, it was standing up. I'm out here, come through the window now, and I don't see anything. I don't want to go outside. Jesus Christ, you better... Dia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
You see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right...
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he in your yard?
He's looking at me.
Oh, the guy is on foot.
I don't know what... It's big, real big person. That's all I can say.
Okay, it is a person.
Yeah, it was a person or somebody really big.
In 2012, Conan O'Brien, on his popular late-night show, interviews and pokes fun of James Bobo Fay, who was a host on Animal Planet's very successful, 9-season, primetime hit, Finding Bigfoot. The very popular series ran from 2011 to 2018, having broadcast 100 episodes.
James, thank you for being here.
You can call me Bobo.
Bobo. I'll call you Bobo. Okay?
Only cops and judges call me James.
Okay. Bobo. Good to see you, Bobo.
Nice to see you.
We got to get right into this. You are a Squatchologist. You are very serious about this.
Yeah.
You believe Bigfoot exists.
Believes for stuff you can't see. I know they exist.
You know he exists, and
They
exist. There's more than one Bigfoot.
They're a species. They're like a primate. Probably in the Homo genus.
Right. Okay, so you've seen
Like Homo sapien, like...
Yeah.
Homo
Have you seen Bigfoot?
Yeah, I have.
You've seen him yourself?
Swear to God.
Okay, well, you have not captured him, though, on video. You have no photographs. You have no film. You have nothing.
I never had the equipment before we started doing the show, and I haven't seen one since 2007. So the last time I saw one, we got the equipment like 2 weeks later. This rich guy Wally buys this equipment now, and I got the equipment 2 weeks later. I would have had it. It was only like 70 feet away.
But you were looking for Bigfoot, but had no recording equipment with you.
Well, we did. Not thermals. I mean, that stuff was like $35,000, you know.
Right. Well, good thing Wally came along.
Yeah.
You've gotten a look at him. Describe you've seen Bigfoot. What does a Bigfoot look like?
Well, pretty much everyone here has probably seen it. The Patterson-Gimlin film, the 1967, where it goes walk up the creek and looks back.
Yeah, but many people think that's a guy in a Bigfoot costume.
Well, dude, there's a lot of people think the moon is made of cheese, but talk to like an astrophysicist and you're going to find out, you know.
That's a good point. Most people believe that moon is made of cheese.
Well, they tackle the old...
So you can tell the difference between someone in a Bigfoot costume and the actual Bigfoot.
Well, the Patterson-Gimlin film we were talking about earlier, the 67, no human on Earth meets those proportions. Like, you can't extend from the elbow to the shoulder or from the knee to the hip.
Have you seen my proportions? I
said human.
John Tesh. Oh, thank you. John Tesh and I both could be a Bigfoot. We both have extremely long legs, and I have elongated arms, and I roam the woods nude at night often. These are all true stories. You do. You try to attract Bigfoot when you're looking for him. How do you try and attract Bigfoot? Bigfoot. I'm sorry. I keep saying Bigfoot as though there are one. We all know there are hundreds of thousands.
Well, there's probably between 2,000 and 6,000 in North America, roughly. We'll have a better idea when this DNA study gets. There's a lot of DNA samples have been turned in.
DNA samples from Bigfoot?
Yeah. They've got new techniques to extract DNA.
What DNA do you have of Bigfoots?
Mostly it's coming from hair. Like hair samples already have that. The morphology of the hair, it's unidentified primate. It's been collected in North America. There's hundreds of samples of it.
So it's all hair. That's all the DNA?
No. There's some blood samples where they've crossed barbed wire fences. And I don't want to get too into it, but a guy shot 2 of them 2 years ago in Northern California. And he brought in a chunk of the leg from the adult. He shot a young one and an adult one, and that's the basis of the whole study.
Really?
Yeah, but it's not supposed to say.
Your whole show is about finding Bigfoot, and you're not allowed to say that they found Bigfoot and have a piece of him?
Everyone signed NDAs, but I didn't. But everyone else that's working on it signed NDAs.
So then you're allowed to talk about it. We've got a chunk of a Bigfoot somewhere.
They do.
We've got DNA from Bigfoot. We've got hair. We've got blood.
They mapped the genome, yeah.
Is there semen? Is there Bigfoot semen?
I'm trying to collect that right now. I'll take one for the team. Come on. I'm dedicated.
Hello, Scandal Sheeters. I'm one of your hosts, Anuradha. I want to ask you a personal favor. We recently launched on Patreon. Patreon is a platform where you can help support artists like us for as little as the price of 1 Starbucks coffee per month. It's really cool because as a Scandal Sheet subscriber, we can provide you with exclusive bonus content like uncut versions of episodes, transcripts, and bonus episodes. And you get to know Thad and I on a more personal level and stay tuned with all our antics. It's super easy to do. Just go to patreon.com/Scandal Sheet and sign up. It takes only seconds. Patreon is spelled Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Scandal Sheet. You'd really be doing me a favor because Thad owes me money, freaking deadbeat. Thank you, wonderful Scandal Sheeters. Now on with our show.
We always try to kind of go back to origins and not take anything for granted with our listeners. So, Bernice, for any of our listeners who've been hiding in a cave, for example, for the last 55 years, who or what is Bigfoot, a.k.a. Sasquatch?
Certainly. Bigfoot, also commonly referred to as Sasquatch, is a purported ape-like creature said to inhabit the forests of North America. Many dubious articles have been offered in attempts to prove the existence of Bigfoot, including anecdotal claims of visual observations as well as alleged video and audio recordings, photographs, and casts of large footprints. Tales of wild, hairy humanoids exist throughout the world, and such creatures appear in the folklore of North America, including the mythologies of indigenous people. The majority of mainstream scientists have historically discounted the existence of Bigfoot, considering it to be the result of a combination of folklore, misidentification, and hoax, rather than a living animal. Other creatures of relatively similar descriptions are alleged to inhabit various regions throughout the world, such as the skunk ape of the southeastern United States, the Almas, Huron, and Yeti in Asia, and the Australian Yowie, all of which, like Bigfoot, are ingrained in the cultures of their regions.
Thanks, Bernice. Ellie, we could probably do multiple entire episodes, just examining the 1,000-year-old legends and the cave paintings of indigenous people in America's Asia and in the Americas, Asia, Australia, etc. But for the purpose of this particular pod, I think we should just focus on what has occurred in the last 50 plus years here in America.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay. So the self-described rational Enlightenment Europeans that colonized North and South America beginning in the 1500s mostly lived in blissful ignorance of local mythical creatures, at least as far as we understand. So many years, and there were a lot of other things to worry about, wars and et cetera, et cetera. But in 1967, two guys with an amateur 16-millimeter film camera captured about 11 seconds of an unknown bipedal hominid creature walking in the woods. Now, while that was initially dismissed by authorities, it gradually exploded into mainstream popular culture. And listeners, we're putting links to that short film in the liner notes of this episode, so you can go and look at it yourself, right there on your cell phone while you're listening. But in the meantime, Ellie, can you tell us the story of how this film came about and its reception?
Yeah, absolutely. So Roger Patterson and Robert Gimlin, so we'll call Robert Bob, because I think that was mostly his, that's what he went by. So Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were filming a sort of documentary / docu-series in Northern California. And the purpose of the documentary was to have people chasing Bigfoot. So when you watch this clip,
okay, so it was a Bigfoot documentary. They intentionally went to go look at him.
They intentionally were going to look for him, yes. And, okay,
got it.
And Patterson had become interested in Bigfoot in the decade prior anyway, because he'd read a few articles, and he actually put out his own book about it later, which is like, Do Abominable Snowmen of America Really Exist? He had actually self-published that a year earlier. And so they went to go do this sort of docudrama filming about like cowboys being led by miners and Indians, and they're like basically all on a hunt for Bigfoot. So they had the movie equipment and they had horses, and they were already up in this area of Northern California where they had been logging, so there were logging roads and there was access into there. And then they, according to them, they were on horseback and riding up a creek called Bluff Creek, and they ended up seeing a Bigfoot behind a tree, kind of squatting down, and then the Bigfoot started running, or not running away, but leisurely, I would say, kind of walking away. And the horses kind of reared up in fear, and then they were trying to get their cameras so that they could film Bigfoot, film this creature. They did have a gun, but they had apparently agreed beforehand not to kill anything that they found. And then they ended up taking this film back and having it developed actually over the weekend, which is where a lot of skepticism comes in, because a lot of places couldn't really develop these types of films on a weekend. They just weren't open, but they ended up developing it and then trying to put it out there. And so then it did become very popular. It's really well known now as just the Patterson Gimlin film. And there is a solid 11 seconds of a bipedal creature kind of apathetically walking away from them and looking back over their shoulder. So I don't know much about film in general. Like I don't really know much besides just good quality and bad quality. And I know that the technology in 1967 was very far from, what I can do with my phone by just whipping it out of my pocket. So I just know that it's pretty low quality. And I know there's, if you're into filmmaking, you can probably go way deeper into the details of why it is, possibly edited, possibly not, why it's difficult to tell if it's a guy in a gorilla costume or an actual weird creature.
Mm-hmm. But, so I did go to film school, and I have been first a filmmaker, then a film video maker, now a digital moving image media maker. We keep changing the name. The aesthetics are pretty much the same, though, even though the technology changes. But, if I was going to stage a fake film about a 7-foot-tall monster, I just don't know if I would do it quite this way. Like you were talking about how casual the entity was, just kind of walking without any fear, not running, just kind of looking over its shoulder, then looking back and just walking away. Whereas, just like if I was making an episode of The Walking Dead, I think I'd have the monster to come at me or something, do something scary.
Right.
So, I mean, that's what did authenticity. I mean, everything you said about, okay, how could these two bozos develop their film overnight in 1967 in a remote part of, Northern California? It's like we had a laboratory back at the log cabin.
Well, yeah. And I just think
there's all that stuff, but I mean,
well, I was going to say, I totally agree with you about all of that. And I also just think it's pretty darn coincidental that they were going to shoot a movie about Bigfoot and then they run into Bigfoot. That just seems a little too coincidental. I almost feel like maybe if it had been a logger who saw Bigfoot and, was able to take a video,
and that's the thing.
Something.
And I don't know what kind of preparation that you were saying they went in there with the intention of making a documentary about Bigfoot, and if you were going to do that, I would think you would find somebody some kind of a scout type person who is familiar with Bigfoot or could track any kind of an animal, based on certain things, urine samples or fecal samples or whatever. And I don't know if one of those guys were but that, then you wouldn't be, like you said, just going into hundreds of miles of remote wilderness and let's just roll the dice and hope we bump into him, as opposed to, well, let's track this guy. Like if I shot a bear and I didn't kill him, there would be people who would be able to track that bear and find him, even in the most remote wilderness, right?
Right.
So, or any other kind of an animal that had done something. Like people will be frequently there'll be bear attacks, and nobody gets a chance to do it. They still track down that bear and kill him, right? Because he attacked somebody. So you should theoretically be able to track down an animal such as this, whatever we're calling him, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, etc. So I agree with you. I definitely agree with you on that point.
I do like the fact that there is a shred of evidence. I think it's a great conversation topic. And if anything, it gets people talking about Bigfoot a little bit more, because really it's like the only other evidence that we have besides footprints. And I mean that, there are no skeletons, there are no fecal samples.
Before we go any further,
there's scat. There are no really good photographs of anything. And yeah, nobody's ever brought a dead Bigfoot into a lab. So if anything, I think it just keeps people talking, which is the good part about it. It's a pretty benign conversation topic. So as long as you're not hurting anybody in your quest for Bigfoot, have at it,
Well, that's true. That's true. But I mean, where do you stand personally? I mean, there's two issues. There's the authenticity of this particular film, which doesn't necessarily, even if it is a fake film, it doesn't mean that there isn't a Bigfoot, right? It just means that these guys staged something. But, I mean, as far as this film is concerned, what do you think? And let me just add one more detail that had some degree of authenticity to it, is that, who knows what level of makeup or costuming was available to guys like this in the 60s. Obviously, this is around the time they made that movie Planet of the Apes. I don't know if you ever saw the original one with Charlton Heston.
Oh, yeah.
Those were the fakiest apes on planet Earth, and that was Hollywood. When you look at that movie now, you're like, that is laughable. People were scared of this. You've got to be kidding. And it's almost the exact same year, right? 1967 or 68. So this thing looks a heck of a lot more convincing than than the Hollywood apes, right? The other thing, they gave him longer arms than a Homo sapien would have proportionally. So that would mean that's not that you couldn't have built a longer arm in a costume, but the way the guy is swinging his arms, it's not a guy, it's a gal, actually had breasts. So, and also moving its fingers, meaning that they had to build, if that is a costume, something with articulated fingers. I mean, that's pretty, highfalutin stuff. And again, I give you that Planet of the Apes example. How come Hollywood with millions of dollars couldn't come up with a more decent ape? And these two guys with a 16 millimeter camera, which was equivalent to 16 millimeter, was like Super 8 film or a VHS camcorder in 1967. It was amateur.
Right. Well, and the other thing too is that it doesn't have, when you start asking, okay, who if they put somebody in a costume, who was the person in that costume, right? Because a lot of people have come out saying that they were the person in the costume. And some of the people in the who claim to have been the person in the costume say, oh yeah, they said they were going to pay me $1,000 and then they never did. There's just a lot of people who claim to be that person. So I don't believe really one way or the other. Honestly, the way the world goes at this point, it would not surprise me if there was a Bigfoot. So, but I'm also not a believer. Like, I don't think I'm going to go out and like become a squat. Are they called squatchers? I think. But
well, there's that, and there's the larger term is cryptozoologist.
Cryptozoologist.
So they can basically believe in anything that is mythical, Loch Ness monster, other things. It's not limited to just foot.
Right.
That's the pseudo-scientific term.
Right. Okay.
Cryptozoologist.
Okay, a cryptozoologist. Yeah, I'm not going to become like an amateur cryptozoologist. I'm not going to. But I'm also not like, I don't think it's totally fake. I don't think it's completely unreasonable, because when you start to look at, especially the West, right? Like your Northern California and like the Cascades are really like hotspot areas for Bigfoot sightings and activity. I mean, they really have a lot of open public space that has really only been inhabited by humans, for like European humans basically for the last like 200 years. And when you go back and you look at like Native American folklore, a lot of Native American tribes have stories about big creatures, big hairy creatures, and they have tons of different names.
They do.
And,
they do.
And that,
yeah.
That really remains the same, like from Alaska all the way down, like, into the Pacific Northwest. So let's just say, in theory, there was a Bigfoot that could live to be, 100 or 150 years old. I mean, there's a good chance that in the 1960s, there was actually something there. I don't know. Maybe he was like, what are these humans doing here?
But then, okay, for the purposes of arguments, because there does seem to be enough, either sightings or, even though it's sparse photographic evidence and things of that nature, how come we can't find one? We can find the bat that supposedly was the source of COVID in China, and the chimpanzees that was the source of AIDS in wherever in Africa. But we can't even find, if these guys have been running around North America for thousands of years, Native Americans were making cave paintings of them and stuff like that. We can't even find one skeleton.
Yeah.
How can that be possible?
Well, I think they're social distancing for COVID. they're the world's social distancing champions. That's why. But I do think it's very interesting that we haven't even seen like scat or anything. However, one point that I did find in research is that really almost any animal that we see in, a museum that's taxidermied, either up on a wall or in the Natural History Museum or something, those animals are all there because they were shot, because they were killed. It's very rare that you find
Or dug up. We dug up their bones, right?
Right. And
we never shot a dinosaur, but they're everywhere.
Correct. And so like when you look at animals that have the ability to go choose their own place to die, a lot of animals do die in like a pretty secretive, protective place because they don't want to be prey for a predator that can smell, their illness or their injury and then come and end their life earlier. So I mean, even if you have like a dog or especially dogs, like people's pet dogs, a lot of times if the dog is really sick, their dog will run away to a place where it's going to die. So I
was thinking of elephants. Don't they supposedly? I mean, they've been around for tens of thousands, or if not millions of years as well. And there are we certainly see them in living form in certain parts of the world, especially in Africa. But isn't there a legend that there really aren't like elephant skeletons underground the way there are dinosaur skeletons, that there's like a place they go to die, which, used to be this sort of like the Cortez city of gold. Everybody was like, oh my, think of all the ivory that must be there if we could just find the place where they go to die. I was thinking maybe there is something like that.
Yeah.
What you're saying, where they all go like some big, giant, deep, dark hole, and they all jump down to the bottom of it, and and it's a secret place that nobody's ever found.
Yeah, maybe they do that, or maybe if they're more human anyway, maybe they bury each other or something if they're not completely alone, right? Like if they live in small groups or
that's another
partners,
great point. Right.
Right. So, and I think the other thing,
unmarked graves.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is, I had a realization when I was reading about Bigfoot, and I figured if there's anybody who's actually seen a Bigfoot, or maybe a community where you would have more Bigfoot sightings, or maybe more just lore about these mystical creatures, it would be within the hunting community, because the hunters are outside sneaking around very quietly in camouflage with a gun, trying to find animals. So my husband is an avid hunter, and so I asked him, hey, what's word on the street within the hunting community about Bigfoot? And he actually brought up a lot of great points, and he's out today. Otherwise, I totally would have invited him to tell me what he knows on this podcast. But he was mentioning that really hunters have retrained their brain in the wilderness to really very calmly put together pieces of a puzzle. And so they have to overcome a lot of their fight or flight instincts when they're out in the wilderness, because if they see or hear something, they have to immediately start putting pieces together of like, okay, a twig snapped and, a rock is falling. So what animal could be causing that in this specific area? Whereas if you're not a hunter, if you're just outside enjoying the outdoors, you might hear a twig snap and your brain does automatically go to worst case scenario. And that's like a survival instinct, right? It's a survival instinct to say, hey, the worst possible thing in the world is about to kill you. So you better get to safety. And so even if it's just a squirrel that made that twig snap, then, your body is still trying to convince itself to survive. But hunters have to, think very logically through every twig snap, every rock fall, every silhouette they see, and they have to try to put together the pieces of the puzzle and say, okay, what animal is that? Is it the animal that I'm trying to hunt? Is it something that's a threat to me, or is it something where I am the predator to that person. And so they spend years, like retraining their brain, and they're very, very comfortable outside. So what I gathered from our conversation was more of an opinion that people who are Bigfoot believers or people who claim to have seen Bigfoot, they're people who are typically just not comfortable with being outside. They're people who are outside and they're just maybe a little more scared. They're not as familiar with all the wildlife and the behaviors of the wildlife in that area. And so when they hear sounds or when they see certain silhouettes, they believe their brain when their brain tells them that that is literally the worst threat that you can have. So get out of here to save your life. I just thought that was a really interesting perspective because hunters spend a lot of time outside, especially hunters like up in Alaska that are off the road system. It's different than just getting away from your wife and sitting up in a tree stand like on a land lease or something. I mean, it's like there are a lot of hunters who are just out miles and miles and miles from civilization, off the road system and stuff up here. So
Right. The real hardcore guys. It's sort of like that old movie, The Deer Hunter. Half of them were, they just did what they wanted to sit in the cabin and drink. And then the other guys were out there really trying to find a buck, with however many points, and would track them down and shoot them with one shot. Had to be one shot.
Yeah, because if you're outside and you're uncomfortable and you're scared and you see a silhouette, behind a tree, if you're a hunter, you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, is that the animal I want to be killing? And if so, am I in position to do that one shot to kill this animal? And if not, is it a bear? Did I accidentally call in a bear instead of a moose? Or they're just trying to piece together all the pieces of the puzzle. So I found it really interesting that of all the people who spend time sneaking around the woods trying to find animals, especially big game animals, hunters are like probably the percentage of the population, the lowest percentage of the population that have like any sort of either belief or sightings of Bigfoot.
Do we have a source for that, or is that your sort of like back of the napkin?
No, that would just be my back of the napkin calculation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and hunters are obviously extraordinarily organized. I mean, there's so many magazines and cable TV shows, and then there's the NRA, which was originally wasn't intended to be political. It was intended to be, represent hunters and their guns and gun safety and things of that nature before it got into the politics business. But so, there'd be a lot of ways that they could all stand up and say, okay, we decided there's Bigfoot, everybody. We're only electing congressmen who believe in Bigfoot.
Right. Well, and I that,
but they haven't done so. They haven't done so yet. So.
I'm only voting for people who believe in Bigfoot.
In Bigfoot. Right?
I would love that. And actually then everybody could put like Bigfoot silhouettes in their front yard instead of those annoying like political signs, the election signs in everybody's yard. Then we could just put Bigfoot silhouettes in everybody's yard. I could go for this.
Yeah. I was thinking if we had time to do a cold open, because you were talking about, well, how do we know that, there aren't families or tribes of Bigfoot out there, and they're the ones that bury one another, and that's why we don't see any skeletons. And what if somebody did stumble across like a little village of, Bigfoot, and maybe they had because we were talking about the Pacific Northwest, isn't that the origin of Starbucks? Wouldn't that'd be a perfect place to have a franchise, right?
Yeah.
So you walk in, everybody's a Bigfoot, and they're like, hey, I'd like a caramel macchiato, and then they're all kind of like, just like the guy in the film, everybody kind of looks at you like, oh, is that a human again? Hate those guys ever? God, hate those guys. They're worse than rats.
Yes. I like that. Oh, he's probably going to give me COVID. Better socially distance again.
Yeah, exactly right.
Go back into hiding.
Call that black bear to rip him to pieces. Well, yeah, I'm tired.
I think, actually though, speaking of like colonizations, there was I guess some nests that they think are Bigfoot nests that were discovered on the Olympic Peninsula, but they're on like a timberland, and so it's private land, and so they don't allow access to everybody, and there aren't any pictures. And so I think that's pretty interesting. Like, I don't know if they say it's kind of too sophisticated for bears, and they say it's not good enough for what a human would do. So maybe it was an old colony, and then maybe they all died or something. Maybe it was an old little tribe of Bigfoots, and they had all these nests for sleeping. But they're not letting anybody take pictures of it, which does make me very skeptical.
Well, that's probably maybe a good segue. So, going down the road that, okay, yeah, there's got to be some legitimacy to this, and what could that be? There has been, over the decades, some conjecture among, quote unquote, reputable scientists in a variety of fields like anthropology, archaeology, evolutionary biology, of what a species like a Bigfoot or Sasquatch or a Yeti could be if it did exist. Bernice, can you help us out with that?
Yes. Bigfoot proponents Grover Krantz and Jeffrey H. Bourne both believed that Bigfoot could be a relict population of the extinct Southeast Asian ape species Gigantopithecus blacki. According to Bourne, G. blacki may have followed the many other species of animals that migrated across the Bering Land Bridge to the Americas. Krantz has argued that G. blacki could have been bipedal, based on his extrapolation from the shape of its mandible. Primatologist John R. Napier and anthropologist Gordon Strasenberg have suggested a species of Paranthropus as a possible candidate for Bigfoot's identity, such as Paranthropus robustus, with its gorilla-like crested skull and bipedal gait. Some suggest Neanderthal, Homo erectus, or Homo heidelbergensis to be the creature, but no remains of any of those species have been found in the Americas.
There. So, Ellie, geologists tell us that there likely was a Bering Strait land bridge between Asia and Alaska at the end of the last ice age. So we're in your neck of the woods, literally and figuratively.
All right, and that's actually that's in Nome, which is the end of the Iditarod. So
it is.
Yeah.
Okay, that is known. Okay, so and the theory goes that's, Homo sapiens were not native to this hemisphere. They originated in Africa, made their way up into Asia and Europe and blah, 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 and eventually came over that bridge into the Americas, following animals that they would naturally hunt. So they weren't like being, smart. They weren't being Christopher Columbus. They weren't intending. They were just going where the food was going because they were hunter-gatherers. And that was a long time ago, but 16,000 years plus probably. So at the same time, the theory goes, what would stop a non-Homo sapien who was still hanging around, one of these other guys, whoever they were, Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, Erectus, Australopithecus. I mean, there's like so many different guys, of which we all have bones of in all the major museums, so we know that they're not bullshit. But I don't know. I mean, does that ring true with you as a resident of Alaska, this PhD mumbo jumbo?
Oh yeah, that totally rings true. I mean, I'll be honest, my public school brain, like when you start talking about like the kingdoms and the species and the genus and all that stuff, like my brain just turns to jello. But do I think, yeah, I like Homo epicusis or whatever.
You're like, let's see, airline pilot, anthropologist. I think I'll go with airline pilot.
We have acronyms for everything, so we don't actually have to pronounce everything. Whereas I think these anthropologists, and biologists, man, they are all over these really long words, and my brain can't really process.
The more syllables, the better.
Yeah. I don't have the breath for all those syllables, but I think. I definitely, I think this is the most realistic explanation of Bigfoot-like creatures, is that if they all came over the Bering Land Bridge, the Bering Land Strait, and they all, humans were kind of settling in that area, right? Like we have a lot of Alaska natives and stuff who are, who have been in that area for centuries. And for them, they have very, long-lived generational tales of Bigfoot-like creatures. And so I think that would be pretty normal, if like the big feets just went over somewhere and colonized a little bit and just lived their own life. And then, the Yupik people went and just kind of lived their own life. And, I think it would be very plausible. And then when you look at the grand scheme of things, I mean, the the Russians were only in, the Russians and the Japanese kind of started colonizing parts of Alaska in like the 1700s, I think. I don't know, once again, public school brain. But I mean, that's...
They waited a long time. It was really remote, right? It was almost like the moon.
It was really remote. And so, I mean, only recently has like the population started growing in that area. So, I mean, just talking about like, Alaska and then also like maybe the rest of the Pacific Northwest, it's given how normal all the folklore is amongst like Native Americans about Yeti type creatures, or I'm sorry, Bigfoot type creatures. I don't know. I'm kind of maybe starting to be more of a believer in this Bering land bridge story, that maybe they once all kind of maybe not coexisted, but they all just lived at the same time in the same area and just saw each other every once in a while.
Mm-hmm. And then there's another way to look at this that I wanted to throw at you and get your reaction. So last summer on this show, Scandal Sheet, your previous co-host and I did an episode about UFOs because there was this big congressional report, or I'm sorry, national security report that came out and was ordered by Congress. So we did an episode on it. But in the episode, it was brought up that a disciple of Sigmund Freud, the famous psychiatrist, his name is Carl Jung, had actually wrote a book in 1959 called Flying Saucers, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Sky. Now, it wasn't about whether or not UFOs were true or extraterrestrials were true. It was all because he was a psychiatrist. He was saying, basically looking at the belief of these things, of extraterrestrials, was a manifestation of a certain psychological state of mind. So in a sense, it was sort of like a mass neurosis, which he probably would also argue that God is the same kind of a thing, but it's a collective projection of our primordial fears. So could Bigfoot, if Carl Jung was alive today, would he be writing a book about Bigfoot and the Yeti and Sasquatch? Because even with all of these thousands of sightings or hundreds of sightings, whatever it is, what you had originally told me a couple of weeks ago, you had said, I didn't even know there was such a thing as Bigfoot national conventions. That hundreds of people would like pay $800 and go to a convention center and sit down for, a weekend and attend seminars and buy stuff and things like that. So there's probably millions of people that believe in this to some degree. Also, who is watching all these documentaries and TV shows and et cetera, et cetera? Millions of people, and none of them, or tiny sliver of them, could even have claimed, like myself, to have ever even seen a Bigfoot, had a sighting, or even know someone who had a sighting. But they still have belief, even though, or at least devoted, passionate interest, even though they have absolutely no empirical proof to support that interest.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because when I think of, our primordial fears, is our fear as, as a human, is our fear something more physical? Because there are so many animals out there that can kill us, like bears. Great example. Big cats, great example. But people are not as afraid of those, I think, as they are.
I was going to say, so few people, like you're right about the bears and stuff, and maybe that's something you would be concerned about, but nobody in Northern Virginia, the Washington, D.C. metro area, is concerned about a bear.
That's
even though they might go to the Appalachian Trail this weekend and they might be concerned about it there because people have been attacked. More often, the bears just steal their food, but sometimes someone gets bit. But anyways,
well, I think it's interesting how actually really looking at just even the title of Carl Jung's book called Flying Saucers: A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Sky. I think it's the assumption that aliens basically would be smarter than us. And I think that's really what we're scared of, is we're scared of something that is smarter than us, not so much like stronger than us or that wants to eat us. I think we're more scared of something that has way more like cognitive capabilities and just like is much smarter with technology and has way more technological advancements than we do. And so I wonder if the humanization of Bigfoot, right? Like when we think of Bigfoot, we think of like one of our human ancestors. Are we scared that they're actually smart? Because they are so elusive if they're real, right? Like nobody has ever actually brought one home from a hunt. So are how smart are they? And I think that's really what we're scared of.
Well, no, you make that's a great point, isn't it? Because it's like you say, with aliens, we're worried about the War of the Worlds scenario, that they're going to be so smart and they're also going to be as, wicked as Putin or whatever, that they're going to want to take over. We got to take over. So whereas something like Bigfoot or a ghost or a zombie or something like that, which is just very, very, it doesn't have the ability to take over the world. But if I'm in its periphery, I'm going to be scared as hell of that thing. Like you say, maybe it is a bear, and maybe some of these sightings were actually bears, because the bears stand in their hind 2 feet. They can be 6 or 7 feet tall, right?
Yeah.
And maybe at night or at dawn or something like that, you're going to say, "Well, it was Bigfoot." So,
right,
run!
right. Especially
So,
somebody who's not sitting out in the woods and is very comfortable out there and has trained their brain to think, "There's a thing. Let's quickly and calmly analyze what is this thing." People like me and you are going to look at it and be like, "Oh my God, it's going to kill me," and then we're just going to run away and assume it was Bigfoot.
Right. There's like that 9/11 call at the very beginning of this episode that we replayed. The guy's talking about the thing is in his front yard. Right. The thing that he's seen. They're saying, "Are you sure it's not a bear?" He's like, no, it's walking like a guy. And he's like, "He killed my dog."
Right.
I don't know if bears kill dogs. They probably do, but if they're hungry enough. So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a good point there. Is if they're smart enough to hide from human development this long, what else are they smart enough at? Like, how smart are they, and what are they capable of doing? And I think that's what feeds our fear of Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm. But they're not, like you say, they've developed over such eons and eons of time. If they came here at the same time the very first Homo sapien came here, or even before, they've probably become very adept at essentially hiding from people, from Homo sapiens. Whereas even though I live in a very congested suburban area, they haven't been able to get the deer population under control. They just walk in herds down the street like this was, the middle of the woods, up back in the UP or something. And, I guess they breed like rabbits. So they're always trying to think of, oh my God, should we shoot them with birth control? I mean, what do we do? Or do we just outright kill them? Because they can be quite the pest. They'll eat your gardens. Their feces can contain disease and et cetera, et cetera. But they don't really care. I mean, you can be out on a run, on a bike trail or something, and run into 20 deer, and they're all does, no bucks, and they'll just look at you, and there's no way you can get them to disband. You're like, shoot, move. It's like, and they just look at me like, "We're not moving, asshole. There's 20 of us and one of you." So.
Right. Well, and I think that is a good, point, is that like your especially your urban animals, your deer, that are coming and eating your garden in, the suburbs of DC, like those
in broad daylight.
Those are different deer than what you're going to find in the middle of the wilderness, just because they have so much human interaction when they're near people, and then they just become very used to it. And yeah, you're right. Like, people are very scared to kill them. There's a lot of anti, hunting in kind of opinions in populated areas, because people like to look at the deer, but they don't like to look at the deer when their deer is eating their garden. But people, so people assume that if you open up hunting or something to deer, that all of a sudden they're just all going to be gone, which is not the case. They will maybe just become less of a nuisance, or there just will be less of them or something. But I think but deer also are not very smart, so they're just going to sit there, like you said,
That's
on a
true.
trail, and they're going to watch you approach, and then they're going to tell you to turn around. Whereas like a deer that's kind of farther out and doesn't have as much human interaction, the moment they even hear you coming, they're probably going to run away, and you're probably never even going to see them. You might just see like their white tail, running away, or you might hear them, tramping through the woods, but they're going to be much more cautious of predators and things like that. So I think that's why you have a lot more Bigfoot sightings, or reports of sightings on the West Coast in like heavily wooded areas that are not as populous, because on the East Coast it's much more populated, and the wildlife in general is just much more used to humans.
Right, and they're like, yeah, so they're not smart. They're too smart to just walk down the middle of a street like a small pack of deer would be, which does occur, like on a sunrise on a Saturday morning. Look out the window and say, "Is that a pack of deer? Jesus!" Or I don't know what a group of deer is called, but but again, going back to that film. What impressed me the most about it, whether it's a fake or not, is the decision, if there was a decision, that rather than try to be scary, rather than try to be like a monster. I mean, if that was going to be, I've seen a lot of films with bears, coming right at the guy with the camera, chasing them because, sorry, buddy, you got close to their cub or something, so now you're in the crosshairs. You better get out of there fast. So that bears can be really, really scary. That creature, if it was a creature, couldn't have cared less about those two people.
Well, I think it's actually interesting. If you think about bears, I would probably the two animals that come to my mind when I think of like scary things are going to be like bears and then maybe like gorillas, because I think a gorilla is maybe most anatomically kind of like a Bigfoot from my, like I said, non-anthropological brain. And so at least but
they don't attack people, do they? Even where they're
I think they can.
Indigenous, like Africa.
I think they can? Yeah. Okay. And bears especially, so they actually all have different personalities. So if you go out to like the Katmai Preserve in Alaska, where you have kind of those famous pictures of bears at Brooks Falls catching the fish, they've done a lot of studies out there, and there are, hundreds of bears that they study, and they've realized how different all the personalities of the bears are, because some bears in this specific example have no problem going out to the falls in front of all the people and eating the fish, that are jumping up the falls, and they have no problem walking right by people and just kind of being the start of the show. And then other bears are very shy, and they never make themselves known to visitors. They never fish in the more public spots where, visitors are out there taking pictures. And then there are other bears that are just much more sort of territorial, where if you're just walking along and you kind of get close to a bear, then the bear is going to try to scare you away. So almost in a sense of like people, there are different personalities within just bears. And I think it's the same way like with a lot of your other like gorillas and monkeys and things too. So it could be that this idea of a Bigfoot, if it is out there, I would assume that they all have different personalities as well, where, some of them maybe if it were a different Bigfoot that they had seen in the video, maybe it would have come after them and been more monster-like, but maybe this specific Bigfoot was just like, oh, that's nice. Okay, cool. Those are people. And now I'm just going to go check on the casserole in the oven or something. So.
Well, no, that's a good point. I mean, Homo sapien can be a Buddhist monk, a pacifist, or he can be a sadistic Russian Green Beret, I guess. So, and they're the same species. If we put their DNA in the bottle, say, well, they look the same to me. Well, they don't act the same. So. So there's something to that nature nurture.
Yeah.
But, okay. So, well, as we come to the end of this, Ellie, maybe it's time to do, unless you have anything else you want to throw in there, we can do our usual sort of jury ruling. Do you have anything else you want to talk, subject wise?
No, I think that's kind of all the big things I had. Okay.
So what do you think? What you got to say, guilty, not guilty, or whatever, is Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the Yeti, all the other names, is it a giant hoax by someone or some people? Is there something possibly legitimate there? Or, as we said about Mr. Jung, Dr. Jung, just a projection of our ingrained human fears? What do you think?
I think if I have to be a judge and make a decision, I say yes. I say
yes to
big
which
feats,
one?
big feats exist out there. Either just solo or, walking, in little maybe partners or tribes. And I think that they're just very smart and they stay away from people. And I encourage all the Bigfoot hunters out there to keep hunting because I actually would be super curious to see something come up, like legitimate. I think that would be really exciting. I'm not going to be the one to do it though. So as long as, like I said, I think there are a lot of hobbies out there, and I think squatching is a very, very benign one. And if they ever find one, then I think it's going to mean a lot for anthropology and our understanding of where we came from and for, how smart they are for just staying away from people that long. So so I say yes, they exist. That is my final answer.
Bernice, what about you?
I just hope you, Ellie, and our audience are learning that there's a lot about the world we live in that few of you people know. But in this year's National Convention of Cryptozoological Creatures, which I've been asked to host, I'll be playing this podcast for their entertainment.
Yeah, you know what? I think all three things can be true simultaneously. So it doesn't, when you go into the anthropology argument of, because Homo sapiens, according to these very same scientists and archaeologists, have only been on planet Earth for about 65,000 years, which is not that much compared to sharks and tigers and elephants and birds that have been here for over 1 million years. But all the guys that came before our specific race, the proto-humans, the other Homo Latin name, they had a huge head start on us. And, there's no written records. We don't even know what happened to them. Obviously, something happened to them. But is it logical that the hundreds of thousands or millions of other creatures that were alive when we came on the scene that they all died? That none of them were able to survive? So that's possible. But someone who's very cynical, whether or not they believe or don't believe, they can still do a hoax, right? Even if you're like the two guys with the film. I mean, even if they did truly believe, they say, well, you know what? Let's do a hoax anyway. And then maybe eventually we'll bump into the actual thing. Or it can be like all these people attending these conventions. It can be a projection of our fears, like UFOs. We hope you'll follow or subscribe to Scandal Sheet on your favorite pod platform.
Do it.
And share it with all your friends, just like Anurada does every day.
Do
tirelessly.
it.
She sits there on Twitter all day saying, hey, man.
Share.
We'd also love it if you leave us a shameless, over-the-top rave review on Apple Podcasts, especially. That helps us build audience. And we would really appreciate if you could support us on Patreon, where you can enjoy premium bonus content less the price of a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So just go to patreon.com/Scandal Sheet. Also, we want to hear from you. You can reach us online at Facebook or X, formerly Twitter, LinkedIn, or TikTok. Or just send an email to scandalsheetpod@gmail.com. See you next time on Scandal Sheet.
Scandal Sheet.
Copyright 2024. Thad Halsley Media. All rights reserved.